started to ask me if I could help them, market their place. Now, what do we mean by a place? We mean either a city or a town or a village. And that means that there's interest in attracting tourists. There's interest in attracting new residents or skilled people to the community. So the result of my research was a book called Marketing Places. And its subtitle was Attracting Investment, Industry, and Tourism to Cities, States, and Nations. And we made an edition of that book for Asia, too. That's the second picture you see there, because we wanted to change the particular cities that we wanted to address and show how they can be better known. Now we get to this book, Regeneration, and it was very recently published. But let me move on. And if I can move on, I'm trying to move my slides. So Ron, why am I having a problem moving my slides?
Do you just click on it?
I'm clicking on and not getting a movement one way or another. And gentlemen, please be patient because I have some interesting things to say. Shall we?
You can use
Let's see
the
if
up
there's
and down
something.
arrows on your computer. Try that.
Well, the thing is that I don't have anything but my screen.
Okay.
It says you are screen sharing. Good. But I can't see all the other things that help me know that I've got an audience. I see the audience, of course.
Yeah, if you
This is
just
funny because
click on,
there
there
we
you go.
got a little movement there. That's good. And let me just see. Good.
There you
We're going to be in. Okay.
go.
That problem was solved by you, Ron, or someone else. So let's go to my initial interest. Look, the world consists of a vast number of places, cities, towns, and villages. Some are safe places, healthy places, prosperous. Some are depressed and dying. And so cities want help. And so I did my research and I published Marketing Places. And the first step I realized is you don't just brand the place and do some advertising. If it isn't a very good place, you're going to make it worse by advertising it and how bad it is. So I always say, don't apply branding and marketing to a place until it's a better place. Well, let me give you an example. There's a town in Spain called Bilbao, because this one had a great influence on my thinking too. And Bilbao was a well-known city and a prosperous one in the 1920s, but it could never compete with for tourists with Madrid and Barcelona and other great cities in Spain. So they thought, call Kotler and he'll give you an expensive advertising campaign to get things going for Bilbao. Well, when they asked me about it, I said, I'm not going to, it's too early to do any advertising campaign until you have something to say. And I was talking to 600 Bilbao civil servants in Spain. I said, what you need is an Eiffel Tower or something to get people excited. And of course, they're not going to build another Eiffel Tower. I said, look, it could be a museum that would attract people from other parts of the world. And they said, well, we don't have any great paintings. All the great paintings are in the Prado. So I said, but you don't need a great art museum to have paintings. Maybe the museum itself is a work of art. So I told them to think of hiring a guy named Frank Gehry, one of our great architects. And sure enough, Gehry was hired, and he came to them and he says, "Yes, we can build a wonderful museum. Let me show you a picture of it." that is the Gary Museum in Bilbao now. Now, the main point is that all of a sudden, there were chartered flights being arranged from Japan directly to Bilbao to bring people to this museum. And there are paintings in the museum, they're not very extraordinary, but the whole experience of moving through the museum has put Bilbao on the map of many people who want to go to Spain. And it's in northern Spain, away from a lot of the southern part, which is highly populated, but it's doing the job. So a place can figure out something that works. And I wish I could help other places too. Let's take some cities that are just in a bad situation. Take Baltimore. Baltimore used to be a top city. It has the great medical complex of Johns Hopkins. It has a very good museum, a good harbor. In fact, the harbor was the main point of its renaissance, its regeneration, and it worked for a while. Because at the harbor you'd go and there'd be many, many stores and very many tourists, and very exciting. But over time, many of the stores emptied out. Why? Partly because the city became less safe. There was an increase in crime. And even now, if they can't discipline that increase in crime, they're not going to get the harbor traffic again. So we have to say they have to go through a regeneration about what is Baltimore? What is it about? What is different and special and exciting about Baltimore? Same thing with Detroit. How do you get Detroit alive again? How do you create some sense in the people of Detroit that they can do much better by working together? A city like Buffalo is in better condition than those two, but it's doing what it can, and it's trying to get more high tech to come in. High tech doesn't only have to be in Silicon Valley in California, and they're making some progress in that way. Other cities have their problems. Amsterdam always fighting off the water from coming in. They're talking about water. What about Venice, which will be drowned one day? And certainly the plaza, the famous plaza at Venice, is some part of the time flooded in water. So various cities need regenerative thinking. Our own work has been more recently with Palermo in Sicily. And I don't know if any of you have been to Palermo, but it was a very famous city. In fact, it was the center of Greek and Roman culture, too. There's so many treasures and buildings to save. And some of them are being lost because of a lack of money in Palermo. So what does Palermo need? It needs rebranding, yes, better branding, and rejuvenation or regeneration, because otherwise they're going to continue to be short of funds. They're going to lose young Palermo students who will move to Italy, right to the continent, and Rome and Milano and so on. So my friend who wrote the book with me, Christian Sakar, is living in Palermo, and he has done extraordinary things in 2 years. He knows everyone in the city. He knows the mayor. Well, the ex-mayor was a great friend of the city, and he worked with he does not. My friend does not work with the mafia, where the money lies in Palermo. But even there, I think some money is coming in to the city. But the main thing is they're targeting and attracting some Italian firms to open branches in Palermo. And there's been some successes there. So without going into all the details, all of which are found in the book, on regeneration that I'm talking about. You can get a picture of all the activities that take place in trying to spark a renaissance in a city that's a great city, but was sort of dying. So let's move on. I always have to talk about what businesses and industries should we have in our city? How do we get visitors and tourists to come here? How do we get new residents and employees and skilled people to come here? And how do we end up making products and services that we can sell to the rest of the world? Okay. So the concept we're coming into is called regeneration. And we see it as a paradigm shift, because without it, you're just going to have private for-profit work being done by the people, the companies in the city, without any direction. And we would like the paradigm to move toward, what can we do to increase the common good for everyone involved in Palermo or in Baltimore or whatever? And by the common good, I mean how that affects the public, nature. We've always neglected nature too and exploited it, and the private and the plural communities. So to say more about it, this concept that rooted in regeneration is the concept of the common good. Now, look what we mean by the common good. Do you have a good road system? Do you have public parks? Are the police performing well in the court system, public schools? So this is all familiar. And each of them is a ecosystem, a complex ecosystem. And we have to really see which are the most seriously damaged ecosystems in the city, and what can be done to improve them. Let's move on, because we're after a better world, a world filled with better well-being, happiness and well-being. And this is a triangle I use often, because at the bottom are the very basics of survival, right? Food, water, shelter. Are these there in your city and working well? But what about other essentials? Just how's the security? How's the health, the energy, education system, the communication system? How about livelihood? Are there jobs? Do they pay well? And the internet and transport and infrastructure. And we go to what our cultural institutions give us a sense of belonging and excitement. The educational system, museums, others that give us some identity. So this is a large picture of what we're talking about. Let's move on. So when I say regeneration, it has a lot of meanings for different sectors. Take economics. You want to create a society that's free from want and that is inclusive in who it includes and welcomes. You want a regeneration of the nature that surrounds that place. We know that increasingly cities tend to grow and they take up the land and leave less land for trees, less land for animals. Animals are being found now in some cities because they have to go somewhere as the city expands. But we got to regenerate the nature surrounding the place, and work opportunities and cultural opportunities. And you're used to diagrams that point out what we mean broadly about regenerating the common good. But let's take it from a action point of view. So we're talking about a place that probably, like Palermo, grew up so many thousands of years ago, and had growth and exploited its opportunities and reached some peak where it is today, where it is actually beyond the peak, it's crashing a little bit, in the sense that it's losing some of its treasures, its assets. It needs something. So what we do about a situation like that to avoid real collapse and disappearance of a place is to do some investing. Notice the four things about the green. We have to figure out how to invest more into the place, how to repair and protect the place, and how to transform the place by getting the funds necessary to do that. Another look at that is when you have a crisis, you ask a lot of questions. How should the leader act now, if you mean by that the mayor and the big community leaders? What matters to the future and to the planet, and so on and so forth. But you can see that whatever vision you have, you're going to have to alter it. And then one of three things is going to happen in the effort. You're going to have good leadership, not only from the mayor, but the whole group that wants to get the place going again. Or you're going to end up with a reduced city, sort of reset and living a new normal, or you're going to have much bad leadership going on that even makes the city go down further. So we're trying to work with these concepts of protecting, repairing, investing, and transforming the place that we are focusing on. And here's a lot of the concepts. First of all, let's be sure we can attract outside investment by giving them narratives and stories of what's possible and how they, in the terms of their own self-interest, will improve by helping bringing us investment. And we should at the same time minimize extraction of hurting our resources. We should be careful about preserving nature too. And we want the people in the city to do local investment. They should not only be buying and selling things, but they may have funds that we could attract and have reinvested, and make sure these funds circulate to where they're needed and end up in local wealth building. So that leaves a lot of questions to us in trying to save a place. What services does the community say we need most urgently? How do our community value propositions compare with those of other communities that we admire? By the way, this idea of a community value proposition is a kind of a marketing concept. If we're trying to get help from people, what's the value proposition we offer them in their terms, and what's meaningful to them, and what value propositions do competitive cities are they using with some success? How do we bridge the gaps to create local value in the community? How to get the citizens themselves to be creating the value? And we launch a minimum viable service with our existing budget. Sometimes you're not going to be launching a perfect solution, but there is a concept of, can you put out a minimum viable service or product or set of products and see how they work? And if there's good results, you can get them to a higher level. And how do you plan, execute, maintain, and measure impact? Of course. So look at two things that are important. One is, what are the problems in the city? And they are so interactive. It's an ecosystem of problems, isn't it? Unemployment is going to mean more truancy and more slum housing and more broken families. And then gangs arise, and they make things worse with crime. And then there's abuse of people and mental health problems and illiteracy. it's a complex system, but you have to understand those needs in a community. I've done some work in Greece. Athens is a problem, has a lot of problems happening in Athens, of the kind you see here. But now there are community assets. So notice I'm playing off the community problems against the community assets. What are the assets? Well, your businesses, your schools, your churches, your clubs, even groups, elders, young groups, artists, hospitals. In a sense, if we go to the next slide, we can see that they work through each other. Here's a diagram that shows a credit union or a bank at the top, and then the community residents interact with those credit unions and banks. And meanwhile, there are utilities also in the community providing power and light and heat and so on. And there's a local government. Hopefully there's a good university or college in the town, and hospital. And you can look at the diagram. So these things are mapped out for a community. So there is a thing we call ABC, asset-based community development, ABCD, asset-based community development. And it has a lot of premises that everyone has gifts in the city. Everyone can do some good. And relationships are very important in communities. If people don't know each other, the community is not going to develop very much. That at the center of the city are the citizens, and we need leaders, the sources of leadership, and you can read the rest of the list, but it's pretty obvious that we should know what our assets are and what our problems are. Here's the thing. Do we see development as really needing outside help? Or can we do it ourselves? Does development from the inside out mean that outside doesn't count? And I would say, no, outside does count. We need more money from outside, especially to help lower income inner city neighborhoods and so on. And we need outside resources not being wasted. We want to get them and use them carefully. But don't make the mistake of only relying on outside resources, because if you do that, those outside resources could overwhelm or dominate or replace a lot of efforts on the part of the local citizens to save their own city. Yes, you want outside help, but you also want to be all working inside to improve things. So there is a concept of resilient cities, which is not completely the same as regenerating. You know, when you talk about building resilience in a city, often it happens when there's been a crisis or a hurricane where people have been hurt. You got to, as a matter of fact, expect some natural disasters that might occur and have preventative steps before they occur. But in any case, there's a very famous person to quote in a lot of this work, and that's the late Jane Jacobs, who in 1958 wrote the book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities. And she had seminal ideas about cities where you can walk a lot with mixed-use design and community resilience through urban planning. And there's a lot of points about that. Even if you're working on your city to be resilient, that's not the same as transforming it by regenerative work that build up the common goods, the common goodness of the city. But there are some points that are listed there. So let me give you one example of an effort along the lines of regenerative marketing, and that is the city of Houston. Houston is made up of 10 historically under-resourced neighborhoods that are neglected, just like there are always big cities that neglect the bad places, the under-resourced. And they want to develop a plan called complete communities that know each other, that a relationship is being formed between these six very under-resourced neighborhoods. And in 2017, a citywide initiative was done to revitalize Houston and give resources to the under-resourced neighborhoods. And the mission was called Complete Communities. So they felt that the whole city has to get better, not just the prosperous part of the city. There should be an equitable distribution of the resources to cover all the communities. And the mayor is Mayor Turner, and he said each Houstonian should know their neighborhood, and we have to build complete cities from recovery to resilience, championing them, and so on and so forth. My brother Milton wrote one of the most meaningful books about helping cities called Neighborhood Governments. He actually wanted each neighborhood to have its own government, not independent of the city government, but that people were organized to be seeing themselves as governing their own neighborhood. So we expect that Houston will be a wonderful example. We describe this in the book on regeneration. For if you're looking for a good example of a fairly successful regeneration occurring. So let's look at our community as a platform. And now we can get a little detailed. There's a private sector, and it consists of lots of industries and businesses. And you got to look at the whole thing and ask how well are they organized and operating, and so on. And then there's the public sector that generates education and energy and health systems and so on, and defense systems. Now, there's a sector we call the plural sector, as a that is more than just the public sector. It's philanthropic services, co-ops and collaborative capitalism, and local communities working together. So this becomes some of our tools for making. We select among these entities those that we should work on first and have a long range view of progress. So what does a place do to market itself? So I'm going to move toward the end of my talk with some of the things that we've learned. Develop a working team of public officials. Of course, you can't leave them out of any plan to develop and improve a city, but include leading business people. You sign them up, get them to also want to help. And of course, you must get academics and prominent citizens in on this too. Establish an economic development agency, EDA, with skilled professionals, by which I mean economists, demographers, marketers, and salespeople. All of them would be important. And then assess the main, well, this is called the SWOT analysis, and every company has done SWOT analysis, but so we're talking about a community doing it. What is SWOT? It's S and W is strengths and weaknesses of the community, and then O is for opportunities and threats. That's more external. So S and W is more internal, and O and T is external, the opportunities and the threats coming from outside the place. So you do a SWOT analysis, and then you start distinguishing alternative feasible futures for the place. It's not, you hope to come up with people who have imagined different ways to solve and revive, make alive again the place. And when these are scenarios, you're creating different scenarios that are possible for the place. So you say that if it's Baltimore, maybe the future of Baltimore is not in the harbor, but it's in making it a medical force. It's already got good medical, John Hopkins, but what are some feasible futures? And then the community decides and backs one of the most attractive and viable future pictures that the community might have. And then the whole point is strategizing toward setting goals and strategizing toward it in a 10-year plan to implement that future, because there are no quick fixes. And of course, even much change occurs in the first and the second year of any 10-year plan, where it's more continuous planning. It doesn't end. Now, spend liberally on improving the infrastructure, develop attractions, and promote the place's image with good public relations and marketing work. So the main workers in this are the public sector people, particularly the mayor or city manager, the urban planning department, the business development department, tourist bureau. Very important. You want tourists, it will be one great source of revenue, and conventions too. How about being an attractive city for holding conventions? And then private sector, individual citizens and leading enterprises, real estate developers. You hope that these members of the private sector love the city, remember how great it was, and they're going to back it 100%. And when that happens, it works. And when you don't get anyone believing in the potential of that city to regenerate, then things get only worse. So you also need, as you move along, a tagline for the city. If you can develop a kind of look what New York accomplished from the Big Apple. That was very helpful. Rotterdam keeps saying we're the gateway to Europe. In other words, don't fly from the US to London. If you really want to get into Europe, you come to Rotterdam and go straight from there. But list the distinctives of the city. It should have some distinctive things. Take Amsterdam. Oh boy, if you want to learn about Rembrandt, it's right there, and Van Gogh, the Rijksmuseum, the canals, the flower market, and so many exciting things in Amsterdam. And then make the great use of what we call brand carriers that carry a brand, whether it's Amsterdam or New York or something like that. These are stories, these are icons, images, festivals, events, people, folders, brochures, videos, maps. These are the brand carriers. So the 4 challenges of regenerative marketing is to improve the infrastructure, very important. Market the people and the lifestyle of the city to others. Build distinctive attractions and promote the place's image around the world. And so to conclude, cities and regions face increasing competition for jobs and businesses and tourists and residents. I mean, there's so much competition between cities for the same desirable groups that they would like to attract. So a place must systematically assess its SWOT and develop a real SWOT analysis, and then go and put the strategic regenerative marketing plan to handle SWOT. A place must secure the cooperation and participation of all the officials and community leaders of leading businesses and so on. And regenerative marketing is not a one-time affair. It is a continuous community effort to build attractiveness. And I'm going to end by just saying that this time, like all times, it can be seen as a good one if we but know what to do with it. It's Ralph Waldo Emerson's view that there's a mental mindset you need. You need a mindset that is positive and almost aggressive in wanting to improve the place. So let me stop there. Everyone in the audience must have experiences in their own city or some other city that is either very alive. Some of you may have stories about something that was a damaged city and really found an answer, and it's now very alive and well. Others may want to talk about some damaged cities and what we might do with them. But I leave it on to you to get any questions that the audience might have.
Thank you very much, Professor Kotler. So now we open the floor to questions, and if you can just raise your hand if you would like to ask a question, and I will let you unmute yourself. So go ahead and raise your hand if you have a comment, question, discussion point. I'll start, Professor Kotler, just by asking you if you had to choose one city in the world, which one would be your favorite and why?
Oh, that's a question everyone would enjoy thinking about. And in my case, I'm very interested always in when I take a travel to, not for an occasion or a speech, but I'm happy to be in Italy, first of all, and I would be very happy to be in Florence or Rome or Venice. So that's my centering point, because it's much to do with food as those places.
I was just going to say, does it have to do with
maybe
the food
other people here might want. Well, any other nominations of where any of you would like to be?
Yeah, if the audience would like to share as well what their favorite city is and why, that could be. I don't see any hands up yet. If anyone has a comment, question, or discussion point.
There's someone there. Hi. Ron, do you see that gentleman?
Flavia, do you have a question or comment? Go ahead.
It's named Alan. Alan has his hand
yes.
up.
Hi, Mr. Kotler, if I can call you Phil.
Sure.
I live in Houston, and I'm experiencing exactly what you described. The city is regenerating, and all for the good, to the point where we're now getting more people coming in than I think our infrastructure can handle. So somehow it's worked too well. And I guess what the city founders or the city officials need to think about now is, how do we improve the infrastructure so that we can accommodate all the new residents, because the roads are becoming very crowded. It's starting to look a little bit like LA, with the roads constantly being jammed. And I think they are working on improving the infrastructure, but it shows how well the planning to improve the attractiveness of the city, I think, is working. And by the way, I share your love of Florence. That was the first thing that came to mind when I heard the question. So,
Alan, I happily had you in the audience to talk about Houston, but it raises the question, a concept that I use a lot sometimes. I call it demarketing. Houston is enjoying good growth, and it could be too much, really. So what do? You know, there's a whole field called degrowth now.
No, I didn't know that.
Well, I read up on degrowth, and I'll tell you why. We used to say that the purpose of businesses and an economy is to grow endlessly, just more and more and more growth. And then we got a new problem that we never saw before, which is called climate change.
Mhm.
And that growth is accompanied by generating carbon, and carbon heats the world, and therefore the world gets hotter. And then people in Sudan and elsewhere where it's so hot have to flee and go to Europe, go to Australia. So how do you go from endless growth to reasonable growth, either slower growth, or how do you go to degrowth? For example, the world's population now is 8 billion people, which was a huge climb from 3 billion, which was back in the 60s or something. And now a book comes out that will really have the following. It's already been published. It's called "Why the World Would Be Better Off with Just 3 Billion People." So the demographer who wrote the book is saying that the Earth's capacity is being over-tested for its ability to deliver a good standard of living to the people living in the world. But we won't get into that question, but let me give you this idea of demarketing and how we might use it for Houston. And I'm going to draw it from the experience where it was used by Portland, Oregon. Portland was getting a lot of people moving to Portland. They thought it sounded like an exciting city and so on. So the mayor started to put out news that, well, it's a nice place, but it rains a lot in Portland. Traffic is pretty heavy in Portland. So the mayor himself was trying to demarket the attractiveness of the city. And maybe Houston has to, instead of just swaggering about how well things are growing, put a little damping on that. And so just the right number of people come to Houston, and the right number of cars and so on. But you're raising for Houston the problem that all the big cities are having. Many people, I live in in 2 or 3 places, but one of them is Sarasota, Florida. So I've chosen a city of 50,000 people where I spend the whole winter, and I can get. And the city has an opera company. It has 4 theaters. It has a great Ringling Museum. And in 15 minutes, I can get to any pleasure of the city. But if I talk about getting somewhere in Chicago, and if I live on the north side, it's a big problem of maybe an hour to get anywhere else that's exciting. So that's another question we're going to have about big cities, about how can we keep the traffic problem? How do we handle living with such a burden? Anyways, are there other questions?
I think we have a question from Flavia.
Yes, Flavia.
Yes. Hi, Professor. It's a great pleasure to be here listening to you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I'm from FGV in Brazil. I live in
What city in Brazil?
Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, yeah, Rio de Janeiro, right.
Rio. And I've been studying what's called smart cities in the academia. And it's interesting because what you propose here, it's very practical, it's great, and it looks like it's very suitable for all kinds of cities, and not only cities in developed countries which has been a major issue for us because it's very hard sometimes to find, even in the academic papers, things that are suitable for cities that are in places that are not so developed. So this is a big issue. So I'd like to thank you for those insights and knowledge here, because I think they are really practical and suitable for any kind of cities. And if there's something else you could add to a city that is not in a developed country like ours, it would be great. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Brazil is a place of great interest to me because I work with one of the top people there, Jose Salibai Neto, who has written 10 books on business management, because he used to run around the world seminars on learning business and learning marketing. And now he's a big author. So he asked me to go to several of your major cities over a set of years to experience them and to give them a sense of branding and marketing. So you've got very exciting places going on. I loved your capital city, of course, which was designed to be a capital. But you've had I guess it's Rio de Janeiro that had some, was it a criminal problem along the, I don't know if that's under good control now.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes, we have this problem not only in Rio de Janeiro, but in São Paulo, Belo Horizonte, Recife, and other places as well.
Yeah. So much gets traced back to the distribution of income, the great problem that wealth tends to get concentrated, and the people who have money are gonna make more money, and the people who don't have money are gonna be some of them turning to crime, because that's the only way to get some resources. And if countries could figure out the right tax system, which really, the trouble is that more democracies are not run democratically anymore. The politicians are chosen by rich donors who are going to finance their election. And of course, when you get elected because you have donors, you got to protect your donors too. So there's never any chance to pass higher taxes on the millionaires and billionaires in the country. The U.S. itself has 750 billionaires in the U.S. India now has an increasing number. China has an increasing number, and that very few of them, many of them think good of themselves. They say, "Oh, I give away a lot of money to good causes," but it's unorganized money. The cause happens to be the university the guy graduated from, or he gives to. There's no organizing of the funds that would address the under city parts, the bad parts of cities, and get the resources into those communities so they can get better. And as they get better, crime would go down. So I have to think more about how we can what is the cause of so much crime, and what can be done about it. Okay, thank you so much for your observations about Brazil too, and developing countries. Ron, if are there any more questions?
Thank you, Flavia. We have a question from US 82043. Go ahead.
That's your name.
I
don't hear the question.
Mute.
Can you unmute?
there's yeah, you are unmuted, but we can't seem to hear you. I'll let you play around a bit. I have two questions in the chat. Um,
Can you, yeah, can you hear me?
oh, yes, go ahead.
Yes, we can hear you now.
I'm sorry about that. I have problems with my headphones. So, yeah, my name is Vincent. I'm French, and I'm calling you from New York City, where I've been starting a new job and a new life 1 month ago. So quite new for me.
Hmm.
Thank you very much, Professor Kotler. For me, it's a great honor to be able to talk to you. I've been a student many years ago at ASCP in Paris, and I've been doing most of my career in marketing and always inspired, obviously, with your book, Marketing Management, and still applying it, because now I'm still working in a marketing function. Yes, I was hearing your speech. I'm not at all involved, professionally speaking, in communities or government affairs. I'm in the food industry. But the question I was writing in the chat is that when I was hearing your speech, I was seeing some notions which to me are relatively close to what we are practicing on a regular basis in the food industry or in the FMCG industry. That's why I was asking the question whether which similarities, but also which differences you would say there are between between regenerative marketing for communities or nations versus companies or brands which are losing ground, market share, or equity, if you talk about brand. And that needs some kind of what we call in my company a renovation plan.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, if you're close to a situation yourself where things are very competitive and market share is not secure, you've got to figure out what's happening. And you can do it. You could call in McKinsey. They'll make a nice analysis for you. It will sound good. Or you could, often I tell people, there's a free asset that you can always use. And that's called a college class of students in marketing. So you contact in New York City, either City College or NYU or Columbia. You talk to the marketing department head and say, hey, maybe your students who are in the process of learning a lot will want to take my problem of food and how to create a stronger market position for a brand that is a healthy brand, but it needs a little more work. And sure enough, when I was teaching at Northwestern, I would welcome calls from companies. Oh, good, I'll get a team on your problem, because they learn. Often they're more insightful than McKinsey, because they're going to get a grade out of coming up with a really new solution to a problem that seems difficult. So why don't you try in New York, where you're now residing and you're in the food business? First of all, there are certain trends that will mark the future of the food business, because you better be an organization. We know consumers are now more and more interested in health. And there's a lot of things in the food industry that have not helped our health. And there's other things. So see what you can find out from some student team looking at the way you define the problem, and you can benefit from it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for the tip. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're at about 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, so we'll wrap up in a minute. There was 1 or 2 questions in the chat, Professor Kotler. Maybe I'll just ask one of them that I can see here. You mentioned your work with Athens, Greece, using this as a special and challenging case, a city with history that goes back millennia. Could you perhaps share a couple of main recommendations for its regeneration?
Which city was that? Palermo, you mean?
Athens.
Oh, Athens. Oh, I wish I had the diagram that I had seen about Athens. Athens has a fragility. First of all, it could be subject to very bad climate, eruptions. And secondly, the crime is the problem in maybe not on the islands, but I'm talking about Athens. And Athens has to spend a lot of money just preserving its beauty and its resources. And the real question is, what does Athens produce for consumption abroad? Because I think what happens in a city like Athens, everyone will tell you one of the cities that they must visit before they leave the planet is Athens, because the home of democracy in ancient Greece and so on. Tourism is the biggest income for Greece, and Greece has to compete now. You know, if you look around, you'll find out that what's really the place to go now is Portugal. Portugal is the place where you get good value for the money as a tourist. And Spain, and maybe fewer people say, well, let's go to Greece, unless they're going to the islands in particular. So Athens may be needing a facelift. Besides better infrastructure and wealth building assets. I haven't worked intensely on it. I wish I could have flashed on the screen what I saw as a whole SWOT analysis of what's good and what's bad and what has to be done in Athens. Okay, Ron, I think it's been good always to think about these issues that affect everyone. Everyone lives in a place, and hopefully, and that your question about where would you want to live if you don't live where you're living now is always an interesting startup of a conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Kotler, and thank you all of you for joining us from all over the world. We really appreciate it. On behalf of the IMPM program, I want to thank you for joining us today, and I hope you got something valuable out of today's session. And thank you again, Professor Kotler, for taking the time to do this session.
Yeah.
We're honored to have you, and I invite all of you to join us in October 26th. We'll have a panel of experts on artificial intelligence and what executives need to know about artificial intelligence moving forward. So thank you, everyone, and I wish you all a wonderful afternoon, morning, evening, depending on where you are in the world. And please join us again next month. Thank you very much.
Peace to all. Take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.